One of the best ways to win games in Climb is actually by playing champions that are hidden OP, the non-meta champions that counter those you face every single game, all the Hecarim's, Graves, and Jarvans. And this isn't just your sort of off-meta stuff, it's truly non-meta, low pick rate, low ban rate, but a very decent win rate and strong counter ability to certain popular champions. And as we finally head towards the end of Season 13, I have 4 hidden OP junglers for you today. We'll look at their builds, their strengths, their weaknesses, the ability maxes, everything you need to know to thrive with them. But the fusion of your jungling and chosen champion is the most difficult thing to climb, and for that we have Virkayu.gg. I have a free jungle improvement resource as well as a dedicated program where we have jungle video courses, jungle coaching VOD libraries, weekly free video content seen nowhere else, as well as Q&As and patch note rundowns, as well as a private jungle Discord. And if there's one thing I'm good at, it's converting junglers to gold, to emerald, to diamond, to master plus. If you want to climb faster than anyone you know, jungle diff every game you play, click the link below or head to Virkayu.gg. And starting off, we're going to go with Jax. And that's because we have to go with Jax, because even though he just got his mid-scope update and he's become quite nice to look at from all his skins and his models, and of course his top lane strength is as it always has been, but in the jungle while his pick rate is low, his win rate is gaining a nice bit of traction. And the thing is, if you were to remove all the data about Jax in terms of top lane jungle and you were just to look at his kit, you would see a very highly skilled fighter known for his prowess in both offensive and defensive situations. He's an excelling dueler and also scales like a monster into the late game, where you have macro, split pressure, and then you mentioned the potent 1v1 abilities obviously, or 1v2 abilities if you happen to be especially juiced. Then you've got something that can take objectives, really strong with items, turned into a major threat if you can ever get the early game, and if that wasn't enough and you add in the map scaling on the leap strike, that sounds like a pretty damn good jungler. Overall, the champion is extremely strong. You're starting with EWQ, and then of course you're going to max that W, which empowers your next auto attack, giving it bonus range, or it empowers your next leap strike, so you can use it and then leap strike if you want that added surprise damage. However, we all know and fear Jax because of that big old-fashioned counter-strike engage. Stuns you, it scales with AP, he has this ridiculous max HP damage on it, you're rooted for 1 second, and of course he has reduced damage incoming, so he's got an offensive and a defensive ability in one. Not to mention an attack speed passive and an ultimate that once he has engaged, if he hits other champions will get bonus armor, and of course bonus magic resist. Alright, it also deals damage to you. So when you outline the kit like this, you can understand why this high elo jungler is having success with this champion. Now while his early clears are where he suffers, he's definitely slower in that early game, he is an immense scaler, yes? And so you can either use a red side quadrant, blue side quadrant, or 3 camp clear to get yourself a nice early level 3 gank or dive, but you can also cut your clears short into a 5 or 4 camper just to get ahead of the meta junglers who are full clearing a lot faster. Now obviously using this optimal play condition is the most important thing. Using his dueling strength, pick off lone targets, use your flanking capability to make a nice counter-strike engage. You're obviously trying to use your strong solo capabilities to secure the dragons and the heralds, but you're not gonna full clear, you're not gonna AFK farm, you've got to have a decent amount of tempo to your jungling. And yes, if you want to relax and full clear and stack it up and then go split pushing, you can, but then where are your lanes gonna be? What's the enemy jungler doing this whole time? Are you being counter jungled because you're not as fast at clearing? So while a lot of people think, he's vulnerable to invades and early aggression, I think Jax is a lot stronger early than people think, much like a Kayn. He can definitely surprise you with damage, surprise you with that mobility. However, you're not looking to necessarily go fight, right? You're looking for that laner impact to get yourself fed, some plates, and as again, you saw from the main channel video earlier in the week, on this channel in fact, because this is the main channel, even if you fall behind a bit in terms of CS and the enemy jungler tries to cut you off and get ahead of you, it doesn't really matter if you understand how to not int, right? How to play it a little safe, control your farm. Yes, we're technically farm dependent in that sense if I say that, but that's not true, right? He's gold dependent, and there are many ways to get gold, so keep that gold per minute high. And obviously with that, when you get to 40 minutes, if you've got 6,000 plus gold, you're looking at a 1v9 machine. And for the atomization, you're seeing here the Divine Sunder or the Shojin. Obviously we have the Zhonya's I've put here, but you can easily go into a Sterak's, you can easily go into a Wit's End, what the game demands. But with the nice AP scalings on his kit now, this is really something that you can use as a different sort of damage mix. Obviously when you have a ramping up attack speed passive, then the AD is most important because you keep hitting the AD, the on hit is always good. But then when you have your spells used, the Zhonya's gives you that added burst, plus obviously stasis, to make sure you're hitting a good ultimate and destroying people and making them mad that Jax is in the game. So while it might sound like there's a lot of conditions here, the champion is simple enough. You've got a strong base item for late game dominance, you've got strong engage where you can use your dueling power, you can use split pushing, you can use the flanks, whatever the hell you want, but you've got lane impact, you've got decent clear speed, and obviously you have split pushing. Everything you need to win, and that's why his win rate is good, and I suggest you give it a go. Right, next up I'm bringing in Morgana, because even though her win rate isn't as spicy as you might want it to be, the buff damage to monsters modifier has meant that the Tormented Shadow, the name of the W, is something really rocking down the 4 clears quickly. So obviously we're going to use that to max it first, so we have good sequencing, no counter jungling for the enemy team, and our Q with that 3 seconds of stun time when maxed will go second. It's the fact of the matter that they buffed her ultimate, giving her bonus movement speed, which is lovely, feels really nice, and a scaling stun on that as well to 2 seconds. You have 5 seconds of CC when used properly, think about that. But the damage is also obscene, and the W has missing HP damage, so definitely you want to use this intelligently for your clears and obviously for your fights and your target selection. Ideally, you're hitting your ultimate and then a Q, or your Q and then your W and then you're ulting. You just got to figure out which situation demands which in terms of which spell do you open with, but ideally you want a full max range W at all times. So what she brings here is a balance of ganking, teamfight presence, and objective control. Again, W doing work. She brings the mix of damage, crowd control, and utility as an overarching theme, which is why from the builds you see the Rylai's. Because basically when you see these Morganas go full damage mid lane assassin mode, they are susceptible to the assassins of the game. They are susceptible to stronger junglers who can invade them, can keep them down. And this is all true even though you have that black shield to mitigate crowd control and impactful ultimates. So effectively, let's not go full on assassin where we can kind of be useless. Let's go a build where we can guarantee a slow, we can guarantee stacking CC from ourselves and our team if necessary, and you've got a guaranteed huge way to lock down mid and late game teamfights. In the early game, it means your ganks need to be a little bit more optimized, right? You've got to hit that Q. It can be predictable. It can be dodged by the modern game, but it is kind of wide. It's quite a girthy spell, so you should be able to hit most of them. Just try not to chuck them as much as a Nidalee Spear because it's not as spammable. Early game, you want to clear, you want to look for a few ganks. You're playing it like a Fiddlesticks, like a Karthus. You're not invading enemy junglers unless it's to specifically counter jungle from their bad pathing, like say a Jax doing a gank. You take his camps, right? You try and starve him out. Level 6 is when you get a really nice gank, so try and use your Q for some flashes and dashes early on. Well, just the flashes, because the dashes won't be back up, and then you can guaranteed hit an ultimate, and that basically is when you start to snowball, and you're trying to bring about the mid-game as soon as possible, right? Objectives, grouping up, staying in the back line, utilizing your crowd control and shield effectively. But remember, the Zhonya's is important as well, and remember you are vulnerable to burst damage as well as assassins, so positioning and warding is also crucial, and as I said, good sequencing allows you to stop any invades because you never have to be where the enemy jungler is, and that sort of tracking is going to be very important. Try and set up ambushes with your vision control and land those Q bindings. Enter fights after major threats are identified or crowd control is used, and obviously use your black shield to protect yourself or teammates throughout the game. And honestly, this is a really tight, powerful package. Sacrifice a bit of damage, give yourself more survivability and utility, and I think you've got a really well-rounded jungler that can be used to climb. And even though it can be conditional and tough to use sometimes, smart pathing always wins. Remember that. Next up, we're gonna put Gwen because her data is actually looking quite good and she's more prototypically accepted as a jungler. Jax is a top laner, yes so is Gwen, but Jax has been seen in the jungle on and off for over a decade. Gwen on the other hand, whenever she is jungle, just gets nerfed. That's because she's an aggressive fighter with sustained damage, skirmishing power, Gwen is immune, Gwen is immune, Gwen is immune, true damage, healing, dash ability, doesn't need flash, bonus resistances, and obviously a juicy slow. So I mean, like, what else could she possibly want in her kit? And of course, she has been nerfed multiple times because of this. Oh, of course, she has target max HP. She has that as well. I almost forgot. How could I possibly? For those that are wondering, that is located on the passive, and when you use your E, that dash that you see or use over walls all the time, that does empower your attacks as well. So with that in mind, you're gonna go Q, E, W starting, and then of course Q, E, max with the W finishing last. And obviously she excels in these close quarters combat and excels in extended fights. Now here's the thing, right? The prolonged fights with her passive and Q are great. She's great at taking on multiple enemies with that W as well. Gwen is immune. And she has a strong late game presence with itemization and experience advantage. That means the downside to Gwen jungle is you are hysterically weak early and hysterically useless. Now you can't snowball from kills, that's great, but you're looking to full clear, play it very passive, and you're looking to get to 2 items. So when I tell you guys at 40 minutes if you have 6,000 gold, this is exactly what Gwen does well. The thing is, we see the Nash's Tooth Rocket Belt Deathcap build here. That's because Riftmaker is absolutely fantastic in top lane when you're more so skirmishing, Leeching Leer isn't really an item, and obviously Riftmaker is something that's great into hyper melee comps. Think of it like Gore Drinker versus Stride Breaker. Rocket Belt is better on junglers for accessibility into ganks, into objective fights, and things like this. You can use the penetration better, and you don't really need that Omnivamp as much when you're not necessarily trading all the time, right? So obviously Nash's Tooth first, but after that, if it's a hyper melee comp where you definitely are going to be skirmishing a lot, go Riftmaker. If the game is regular, then just go Rocket Belt. Great for chasing people down, making picks, and using a bit of that mobility in macro to open up the game once you do reach that point. Make sure to focus on squishy targets and flanks to take out any squishy enemies. Don't forget to infuse yourself with golden CS. So if your laners are inting or dying or roaming, take the CS, push the waves, get some plates. Everything's about gold with her as well. She just lacks the skirmishing that, say, Jax has a little bit early. Downsides are, of course, yes, if you don't do enough in terms of your clearing and impact and jungle denial, that's where it really is, right? Denying that enemy jungler so that they cannot impact your lanes while you're farming and scaling, because you just don't have that same impact. But that doesn't mean you're not ganking, yeah? You're still looking for optimal ganks, playing around 6, and whenever you've got downtime between camps, you're counter jungling, invading, objectifying the objectives, or going into lanes for impact. But like with Morgana, smart pathing nets smart results. Once you've got those few core items, you become truly effective and an absolute 1v9 machine. Just focus on your engages, yeah? Utilize your mobility to get into the back line, try to avoid getting kited with that. Don't just run at them from the front when you're not exactly fed. And that's a really nice transition to our next champion, SKARNER. No, I'm just kidding, we're going with Talon, as you can see. SKARNER, just a quick note, yes, he's in this video in theory because I always put him in this video. No one ever gives a shit. He's really, really strong. Go play him if you are really bored with champion design, but he's there, he's strong, we acknowledge this. Okay, Talon now is the one I really wanted to speak about, because while he is more difficult to execute in the jungle position, the champion isn't also that difficult, right? People think E is skillful. It's not. You just have to use your brain to think, all right, let's see where I'm going and how it's best to go around the vision. The difficulty with Talon lies in the difficulty of assassins in general. He personifies the skill issue of the class. Yes, he's a lethal assassin known for his burst damage and ridiculous mobility, and his camouflage of going in and out with the ultimate. Yes, as a jungler, he excels in those quick ganks, assassinations, and exquisite map control. Because you see him top, and then you see him bot. If you're not playing the map properly, you're not controlling the map properly, you're tracking him as best you can, he will run over you, which is why you see so many Smurf Talon junglers literally run all over you. But then it becomes the point of how do you make sure your econ is good in those moments when those ganks don't work out, when the enemy jungler does counter gank you, and if you do get fed, how do you close out when there's deathpool squads, when there's a lot of CC, when you have to play it a little bit differently in terms of your flankings? Shadow Assassin Canes, Evelynns, Rengars, you all have the same issue. Talons, though, being quite direct, obviously the flank with E is good, does need a bit more help, and obviously you see that with the itemization. You can obviously go Axiom Arc or Edge of Night as necessary per the comp, but Axiom Arc is the default way to go. There are some evil gore drink attacks still going about, but I'm not going to promote that here. It allows you to kill people and sustain yourself, but it's definitely not as effective as it was in Season 11 when he dominated the meta with it. Now, while he can't full clear as much as he used to because of the reduced damage modifiers, which is good because his ganks are so obscene, it means you need to understand which clear you want to do, how you want to protect your jungle from counter jungling, and which angles of approach are needed to get around the wards placed by the enemy team that are very obviously placed to cut off a Talon from ganking. So you must capitalize on his early game strengths to pressure lanes, 3 camp ganks, 3 quadrant ganks, or 1 quadrant ganks that have 3 camps, you understand what I mean? If you can 3 quadrant on a Talon, you're probably pretty damn genius and I would like to speak to you. Remember that your W has a bit of a slow there, so you kind of want to use that. You also have bleed damage in your passive, so you don't have to over chase when you know those ticks are going to kill them. Understand these little mechanics with the champion because he is simple to use when you press the buttons, but the little nuances in the abilities are what make a good Talon thrive. Objectives are important here because when you have so many kills with your good ganks and your good pathing, you have to have the kill conversion ratio, get the Herald especially, as well as the Dragons. If anyone is roaming about and they shouldn't be, trapping, good vision control, catch them out one at a time. Try to avoid all team fights, right? Think like an assassin, a hunter. Sit in the bush, kill them, move on with your life and go do something else. However, as always, that's why a Gore Drinker build exists. He is vulnerable to crowd control and burst damage like all assassins, so your positioning has to be really good, and he is less effective in late game teamfights because of this, right? He has to jump in, and then his ult is the thing that will allow him to reposition, but if you get CC and kill, then, you know, there's not much you could do. Predictable in terms of assassination targets means good vision control neuters that to a certain degree, so good Talons are always looking for this, and ways to get around this. Focus on your early ganks to gain a lead and snowball lanes. Use wards to track enemy movements and plan assassinations using E to get in and out which walls are you gonna use. And if you really do have to team fight just because some games you have to, make sure you're trying to get those squishy enchanters out of the way or an ADC out of the way, and then use that mobility to force a suction, but then use your itemization to do it again and again and again. Talon, great one to play if you're a mechanically smart assassin player, and an easy one to 1v9 Smurf all the way to Master tier. And if you want to understand the Korean secret about jungling that allows them to use these champions or any champions to really get a time advantage every single game they play, click the video on your screen now.